welcome, and thanks for joining us for this next session with Ryan. The session title is The Distributed Library, a Vision for Blockchain Libraries and Community. Ryan is the Digital Initiatives Manager at Palo Alto City Library, and his pronouns are he, him. My name is Eliana Franco. I'm the Marketing Director at BiblioCommons. And before we start the session, I want to remind you that you can chat and say hello to Ryan or ask any questions in the chat panel on the right side of your screen. If you'd like, you can turn on a live transcript by clicking on the button located at the bottom of the video stream on the purple bar. And a transcript can be made available for the session upon request. With all of that said, I will hand things over to Ryan to take it away. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So normally I do this in an hour. I'm going to try to cram it in. So I'm going to go over some technical stuff. If you don't understand everything, I do have time at the end for questions. But this is kind of treat this like an intro to the topic. And then you can kind of run with it and look into the things that you find interesting from there. This is a little different than I think some of the talks that we've had today. Erica saw this talk at Internet Librarian and wondered if I could come and do it for you guys. So I'm happy to be here to talk about the distributed library idea. So what we're going to talk about today is Web3. What is Web3 and how do libraries relate to this new internet? And what might a distributed library on Web3 and BiblioCommons look like in the future? So we'll start off with Web3. Web3 is a number of technologies. The key ones here are a new internet called the distributed web. And then there are also decentralized applications and data that are integrated into this distributed web, and also blockchains, distributed autonomous organizations, and NFTs. These are all blockchain type things, and blockchain plays a key role in Web3 as well. So we're going to kind of get into some of these things today. So to start with the distributed web, you may remember, if you're old enough, of a certain vintage, there was a time when the entire internet occurred on one server, or at least it did for each of us, right? So that one server might be your university, or it could have been AOL, but everything you did, right, every way to interact with other people had to go through that one server. And then Web 2 came about, and you had a bunch of companies step up, and they started providing services. And so now, if you wanted to interact with people, you would interact with, say, Gmail to send an email to your friends, or maybe Facebook to check in and do some posts with your friends, or YouTube to watch some videos or share some videos. So you had this kind of, people started kind of enriching the ecosystem with all these different web services. And Web3, though, takes away all those servers. It gets rid of the middlemen completely, and people can interact with one another using protocols, and they interact directly with one another. And so this is a kind of, in a way, a return to the original vision of what the internet was supposed to be like. But this is what we call Web3. So to give you kind of a case study in how this could work. So at Palo Alto, we were experimenting with the distributed web. We took a copy of Tom Sawyer and we published it to the distributed web. And so what that means is that we uploaded Tom Sawyer using a protocol called the Interplanetary File System, IPFS. And we uploaded it to the network. And then it gets distributed across the network to different computers. Different people are going to have a copy, an exact copy of that book. And then if a new person comes around and they want to download that book, they just put a call out to the network, and the network then downloads it to their computer simultaneously from many, many computers at once. And what this means is that the internet can behave much faster. You can get your files much quicker. And it also means that if someone wants to stop you from reading Tom Sawyer, they can't do it. They would have to take down the entire internet to stop you, because all of those different computers have copies of it, and any one of them or all of them can send it to you simultaneously. So that's kind of the power of the distributed web. It really kind of puts a lot of power back into people's hands in terms of access to information and whatnot. So some of the features that come out of this are trust and privacy. This is kind of baked into the technology. You know that copy of Tom Sawyer is the exact real copy that you're looking for, because it's got a hash, which we'll get into in a sec, that tells you that it's authenticated as the actual copy. This also makes possible decentralized identity and anonymous authentication. So this means that you can log into any of these Web3 services. It will know that you are who you say you are, but it won't know exactly who you are. So your identity is anonymous, but you're authenticating through the protocols to verify that you are indeed a real person and that you meet the requirements to access the information you're trying to get to. Peer-to-peer publishing becomes possible with this technology. So authors can publish directly to the internet. Public transactions are both private, but also open and public. So people can't see who's doing the transactions, right? They can't identify the people, but they can see all the transactions that are there. And then there's a permanence and resiliency to the files that go into Web3, as I kind of showed you with Tom Sawyer. So blockchain is a big part of this. And I just want to point out, because this often gets conflated, that Bitcoin is a kind of blockchain, but it is not blockchain. Bitcoin is a financial blockchain. It's the first blockchain that was ever created. But there are many blockchains out there, hundreds and hundreds of them. A lot of them are not financial at all. Some of them are focused on identity. Some of them are focused on audits and verifying truth that people are putting out there. There's a lot of really interesting use cases for blockchain, and they're not all of them are financial. So what exactly is blockchain? So blockchain I like to think of as like a wiki that exists on this network, right? So there are copies of this wiki that exist across computers, exact copies all over the world, and anybody can write whatever they want to that blockchain. However, in order to have your entry on that wiki accepted, then the network has to accept it. It has to be authenticated, and there's a bunch of proofs that have to be satisfied. And so different communities can set up different criteria for what's accepted and what's not, and what the criteria are for validating your claims. And so this is kind of essentially how it works. So it's kind of like a wiki that's governed by a network and is very resilient. So at its core, there are these things called hashes, and these are it's a cryptographic mechanism, and you can see a hash here. This might be a wallet address. It could be a person's identity. It could be a key to getting access to the wallet. But there's a passphrase that generates this hash. And so this is where the security comes in, right? So if I have this exact passphrase here, this string of words, and I put them in the exact right order, then I can get access to, say, this wallet, which is represented by this hash here. But if I just have the hash, I can't get access to the wallet. I can't control it. So this is where the security and the validity and all this other stuff that blockchain makes possible can happen. And this is really, really important in terms of that trust that I talked about, and allows for a lot of things to happen on the internet that couldn't happen without something like this. So what are these use cases with blockchain? So people are talking about things like soul-bound NFTs. So this might be like an identification card. And so you would say you wanted to get a library card, and the criteria was that you had to be a resident of California. So you could have like a California authenticated NFT in your wallet, And then you can use that to log into a library. It would automatically know that you're authenticated as a California resident. It doesn't know your name. It doesn't know your address. It doesn't know anything about you. It just knows that you meet the criteria to have a library card and to check out books. So, that's a use case. Say with social media, if you wanted to take all of your followers on Twitter and move them to another network, then you could do that with an NFT that represented your social graph. And so this kind of, one of the cool things about this technology is it lets you control your data, move around with your data, take your data and use it in ways you want. And it's all private. It's all owned and controlled by you. Credentials and degrees, medical history, academic records. There's a lot of proposals for how this kind of technology could be used. Password management is another way. And then, of course, digital ownership becomes possible with this technology as well. So that could translate to like owning a copy of a book or being able to get access to a database, et cetera. The bottom line, though, if you haven't picked up on this already, is that this technology is very much friendly to libraries and sort of aspires to be very library-like. So it has a lot of the features that libraries like to embrace, right? Open access to information, the freedom to read, et cetera, privacy, all those things. However, this is a revolution in a lot of ways, and we're seeing already in the financial space how this revolution is being greeted by authorities. So the banking system is quite concerned. The Federal Reserve is quite concerned. The SEC is quite concerned. And this is just the financial side of it. But there are a lot of revolutions to come with this technology as they start to be applied to different use cases. Political power will be one that we may see. Copyright and publishing, right? So there could be threats to the middlemen in that regard. Free speech. We've already seen some uses of blockchain for free speech in China to get around the censors there. And of course, privacy, as I talked about before. So lots of potential for disruption here. So let's talk about how this works with libraries and how we might expect things to unfold in the library space. So first of all, libraries can be kind of conservative. And so, this is going to overhaul the whole way that a lot of things are happening in our world. The way that we interact on the internet, the way that we share information, the way that books are distributed, for example, all these sort of things have the potential of being completely overhauled. And so libraries have an opportunity here to kind of take a look at that, but we're going to have to get to work. And I would say the first thing to do is to start looking at the technology and getting kind of accustomed to what it is and what it can do. There are development costs. There's still some open questions about how the government's going to regulate this. Some countries are way ahead of the United States. The US is kind of falling behind in this regard, but there are healthy signs that the legislators are starting to get educated on this technology for what it is and not what they thought it might be. There's a lot of key things, especially with identity, that are still a work in progress. There's a lot of primitives, as they call it, that are being developed right now. And then there's some threats that the book publishing industry might get ahead of us on and start applying blockchain to their products. And then there could be some new paywalls that come out of that, and maybe some incentives to lure people away from open access. But there are a lot of opportunities. So first of all, there's a lot of automation that could happen. You can set up a protocol, let it run on a network, and it kind of runs on its own. The community kind of keeps it going. There's a lot of metadata support, right? So you can have records that are stored on the blockchain, and then those are freely available for everybody. Open access is I think I illustrated with the Tom Sawyer one. And then redundancy, if you're familiar with academic libraries, they're very concerned about having, digital files that are robust and can't be erased easily, right? So for digital collections, it's got that. And so we might see applications of this Web3 technology with universal item records and universal library cards, permanent secure digital collections, open repositories of e-content, all of this without middlemen. And I include libraries in this in some ways, and I'll kind of get into that in a second. But this is where the revolution comes in. But before we get to that, let's talk about how the publishing industry might use this technology, right? So we have here in this diagram, we have libraries over here on the right, in the lower right, and then we have some public users and various other things going on. There's a paywall that has been erected because the publishers over on the far left have designed a blockchain that is where all of their subscriptions are managed, their borrowing and user accounts, the user data, the reviews, all this kind of stuff. It's locked up behind the paywall. If you want to get access to that stuff, you have to get inside and you have to pay a subscription perhaps. And then once you've actually gotten access, then you can get access to their database, their media, their books, etc. So this is like a model that we should be worried about. And there are some publishers that are looking at that, by the way. So there is another way that we could get about this, though. And this is a really interesting idea. So we could actually have like a community-based library, a decentralized public library, where authors and public users have free access to stuff. And in fact, they can use the power of this protocol, perhaps, that the libraries have created to share things between one another without ever having to go to the library. So they might have books at their house, they might have tools, they might have expertise, and they sort of loan this stuff out to people in the community. All of it is recorded on the blockchain, so we know exactly where the item is, who's got it, when it's due. And there are incentives baked into it so that people who use the system might be incentivized with free bus passes or free parking downtown, or maybe they get giveaways, for free public events and stuff like that. So in this world, you might have the library and maybe DPLA and some open databases that are all sort of supporting this protocol and keeping it fresh. And then you might have companies like BiblioCommons, say, for example, that are building an interface to interface with this blockchain, right? So on the back end, the blockchain is not very pretty. It's not user-friendly. So someone's going to have to build an interface to get in there. And they might actually say BiblioCommons might have its own blockchain that works in tandem with the library blockchain and adds new features that the libraries hadn't thought of before. So in some ways, this is kind of a similar model to where we are now. But as I think I've kind of showed, there's a lot of potential here. And this is just one use case. We didn't really get into universal library cards, but that's like a totally other thing that we could get into. So anyways, that is my presentation, and I think I have time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan. That is a ton of information. It really sounds like Web 3.0, the distributed web is super powerful, and being prepared for it and understanding it is kind of the best way. Matt Schneider from Edmonton Public Library, he didn't really ask a question, but I want to share his sentiment that was in the chat. And maybe it might lead to a bit more of discussion. He's concerned about the privacy implications of all of this, and if transactions are kept in a public ledger and can be followed. So if, for example, an anonymous user's identity becomes known, these transactions would then be able to be traced to the patron in a way not possible when libraries do not track persistent information. And these are techniques that are being used in the financial sector to find criminals. So it's not difficult imagining them being deployed against patrons who are borrowing titles that fall under government scrutiny.
Yeah, that's right. This is really good. And I do have a slide where I kind of demonstrate what he's getting at. You can actually go and look at like an actual a transaction record of an individual, and you can start to see like all the things that they've been doing and kind of where they've been doing it. There are, however, other technologies that can come to play that I didn't get into. There are ways to obfuscate all of this and sort of kind of take those transactions and kind of blend them, so it's kind of hard to see who is doing what. So that is possible. And then you can also have blockchains that aren't really public, that are kind of behind a firewall, just like we would have with our ILSs. So that's another layer that you can add to this to help with that problem.
Okay. And what would you say would be the first steps that a library can take if they haven't really considered all the implications or what's to come? You did mention in your presentation the first step would be become informed, understand the technology. What would you say would come after? It seems like a whole lot of potential out there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say get to know what the technology is about, start thinking about these use cases in kind of ways maybe that I haven't even gotten into or thought of, and how they might be used in your library. And also, one thing to keep an eye on is the identity space. So once Web3 identity starts to take shape, it is starting now, but once it really becomes a thing, then I think that's the cue for libraries to kind of start stepping forward, because that is the missing piece right now that we're kind of waiting on. But once that happens, there's going to be a lot of commercial use cases that are going to start taking off around the world. So that's the first thing to watch for.
Okay, good point. Tiff from Chicago Public Library says, for staff and libraries who feel overwhelmed with their existing workload, and she put a raised hand emoji, what do you recommend is the best way to slowly learn more about blockchain benefits and introduce it to the admin, staff, and colleagues?
Well, like I said, get informed on it. There are some very easy to understand armchair books out there that kind of get into blockchain. But I would actually say, like, the distributed web is another one that you should also give equal time to. That one is available. You can play with that already. Most browsers support it now, and you can start publishing yourself and try little experiments to see how it works. Maybe do a program at your library like we have, where you show the public how to use it and talk about use cases and get their feedback on it and maybe get some ideas from them.
Ooh, okay. So we've got 3 more minutes left for your session, and you just mentioned the program that you did at Palo Alto. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so we approach technology programs in our library with a framework that we call change literacy. And so the idea is that we bring in these cutting edge technologies and let people play with them. And we kind of check in with them at the beginning to see how they felt before they even touched it. And then we let them play with it, kind of demystify it, let them see that, oh, I can kind of understand this. I can actually use this. Maybe I have some ideas on how I could use this in my life. Then you check back with them and you have a conversation about the technology and kind of how people are feeling about it. And so this sort of is a process. It's kind of based on change management, but with public programming and digital literacy. And so this is kind of what we do. And so we did this with the distributed web. We had a hackathon where people built virtual reality spaces. And then we published those to the distributed web, and we created an exhibit that was on the floor of one of our libraries so people could kind of, learn about the technology, see what customers like them had done with it, and kind of see the technology in an actual use case.
Okay. And would you have any recommended reading that you could share for people to start learning a little bit more? That was a question from Hope at Johnson County Library.
Yeah, ALA put out a book called Blockchain. And I do have a part of that. I have like a book chapter in there. But there's a lot of use cases. Some of them are academic, but some of them are public libraries. And you can kind of, there's a good introduction to the technology in there, and you can kind of see what other librarians are saying about the technology. So I would start with that. And then of course, YouTube is always your friend. And if you haven't tried ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to help you understand some of the topics and ask some questions of it. I think that's a good process for learning.
That's great. Thank you. And we've reached the time for the session. Thank you so much. So much information and so many takeaways for us to kind of get going and learn more, right?
Great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.